Welcome to Hidden Reality. A young man wades into his flooded, muddy backyard in West Virginia. Days of relentless, heavy spring rains have saturated the ground, opening up a miniature sinkhole right in the middle of his garden. And rising from the muck is the top of a heavy-duty plastic bag, tied tightly shut. He reaches down, he pulls it open, and what he finds inside will finally close one of the most baffling cold cases in the county's history.
Today, we are unraveling the disappearance of Kathy Gobble. This is an absolutely fascinating puzzle, packed with bizarre red herrings, dead ends, and a shocking betrayal that no one saw coming. We are going to break down exactly how investigators untangled this twisted web of secrets.
To truly understand this complex mystery, we actually have to start at the gruesome end of the line, deep down in the mud of that flooded backyard.
Let's go back to that moment in 2012. The young man pulls the heavy bag from the sinkhole. He unties the top, peers inside, and immediately drops it, backing away in sheer horror. Inside the bag are the decomposing remains of a human being. The police are immediately called to the scene. But whose backyard is this? And more importantly, who is inside the bag? Keep that in your mind. Because to answer those questions, we have to jump back 2 entire years to the very day this all began. Saturday, April 24th, 2010. We have a meticulous, ticking clock detailing the last known day of 64-year-old Kathy Gobble. She arrives for her shift at a high-end men's clothing store at 9 a.m. At noon, she goes on a lunch date with a regular customer, Dr. Harry King. Later that afternoon, back at the store, she gets into a massive, public screaming match with the daughter of a coworker, a young woman named Jessica. At 5 p.m., her shift ends. Kathy is so rattled by the argument that she asks a male coworker to escort her to her car to keep her safe. That evening, she drives to check on her ex-husband, David, and makes a phone call to her current boyfriend, Fred. Finally, at 8:30 p.m., she has one last phone call with her friend Laura before vanishing without a trace. Look at how many intense, complex interactions she had in just a few short hours. What makes this so interesting is how Kathy's interwoven relationships created an immediate, messy cluster of suspects. Kathy was a beloved, highly social sales clerk. She had been divorced twice and was enjoying her independence. In fact, she was hesitant to accept a recent marriage proposal from her boyfriend of 2 years, Fred. But simultaneously, she was having a secret affair with the wealthy Dr. Harry King, who showered her with gifts. On top of that, she was still acting as a caretaker for her ex-husband David, who had recently suffered a severe stroke. When she went missing, investigators didn't have a lack of suspects. They had entirely too many. But the biggest clue came from Kathy's final phone call at 8:30 p.m. She was talking to her friend Laura, pulling up to her boyfriend Fred's apartment. Fred was out of town on a fishing trip, and Kathy had planned to go there alone to clean the place as a surprise. But right before hanging up, Kathy said something incredibly cryptic. "We're going into Fred's apartment." We, not I. She was supposed to be completely alone. So who was the we?
It was time to untangle this web. 4 people. 4 very different motives.
Put your detective hats on, because investigators had to meticulously weigh the motives of everyone in Kathy's life. Let's look at the suspect board. First, Fred the boyfriend. Did he find out about the secret affair and act out of jealousy? His fishing trip alibi was completely unverified at first. Second, Dr. Harry King, the secret lover. Did the affair go wrong? He claimed he was home with his wife, who actually verified his alibi. Third, Jessica Fisher, the coworker's daughter. She was an addict who publicly screamed at Kathy for refusing to give her pills on the day she vanished. Jessica agreed to a polygraph test, but then skipped it and went completely missing. And fourth, David McCartney, the ex-husband. He was technically the last known person to see her alive that evening. But as a stroke victim with severe mobility issues, it was highly unlikely he could have physically abducted her. Detective Brian Carper, who was close with Kathy's family, zeroed in on Fred. When Carper visited Fred's apartment, the scene was bizarre. Fred had returned from his fishing trip to find his apartment scrubbed spotless. Lights had been left on, a window was wide open, and sitting right on the kitchen counter were Kathy's most vital possessions: her cell phone, her daily medication, and her spare car keys. It is incredibly unusual for anyone to voluntarily leave those things behind in a suspiciously clean apartment and just walk away. When Detective Carper asked Fred if he found it odd that she left these crucial items behind, Fred looked away, avoiding eye contact, and said, "No, it actually wasn't odd. Kathy was sometimes quite forgetful." Did you catch that? Was.
Kathy was only missing for 40 hours at this point. Why was Fred already referring to her in the past tense, as if he knew she was never coming back? To investigators, this made Fred look incredibly guilty. But just as they were turning up the heat on Fred, the investigation was completely flipped on its head.
They found physical evidence, a bizarre staged scene out on the highway.
Police located Kathy's silver Honda SUV abandoned on the shoulder of a highway 15 miles outside of town. I want you to consider the logic here. Why would a woman who left her keys, phone, and medication at her boyfriend's house drive 15 miles out into the woods in the middle of the night, abandon a perfectly working car, and vanish on foot?
This brilliantly illustrates a meticulously staged scene. The car was found with a white towel rolled up in the driver's window, a universal distress signal indicating a breakdown. Yet, when Detective Carper used Kathy's spare key, the engine started instantly. It had half a tank of gas. The doors were locked, her purse was gone, and forensics found absolutely zero blood, DNA, or fingerprints. Someone had wiped that vehicle completely clean and set up a decoy to throw the police off their trail.
But despite having a decoy car and a list of compelling suspects, like Fred, the secret lover, and the erratic addict, the trail completely vanished. Whoever wiped that car down did a flawless job. Weeks turned into months. There was absolutely zero activity on Kathy's bank accounts or credit cards. Without a body, a confession, or a single piece of physical evidence tying a suspect to a crime, the investigation completely stalled out. For 2 agonizing years, the case went cold.
Until a shocking betrayal finally revealed the face of the killer.
We are finally returning to that flooded backyard in 2012, to the sinkhole and the terrifying discovery inside the plastic bag. Forensic evidence on the body finally identified the remains as Kathy Gobble, and the location of that grave blew the case wide open. The killer wasn't Fred. It wasn't the secret lover or the ex-husband or the enraged addict. It was Charles March. Remember him? He was the friendly shoe salesman from the men's store. The very man that Kathy had trusted to walk her to her car that afternoon to protect her from danger. Charles March was never on the suspect list because he seemed so helpful. But in reality, he was an obsessed stalker with a dark history of targeting women. The protector was actually the predator.
Let's look at how this horrific night unfolded step by step, finally explaining that mysterious phone call. Charles had been stalking Kathy. That night, he waited in the dark outside Fred's apartment. When Kathy arrived, still on the phone with her friend Laura, she was surprised to see him. But since she trusted him from work, she casually waved him inside. That's why she said, "We're going into Fred's apartment." Once inside, Charles lured her to take a drive with him to his house on the edge of town. Confused but compliant, she left her things on the counter and got in his car. At his house, he demanded sex. When Kathy rejected him, he flew into a murderous rage, strangled her, and buried her in a shallow grave in his own backyard. Then he drove her car 15 miles away, wiped it down, and staged the breakdown scene.
And here is the final, most tragic irony of this entire story. Remember the young man at the very beginning of our story? The one who looked out his window after the heavy rains, saw the sinkhole, and waded out into the mud to pull up the heavy plastic bag? That young man was Charles March's own son. He had unwittingly unearthed the gruesome secret his father had buried in their family garden 2 years prior.
Faced with the overwhelming physical evidence from his own backyard, Charles March was arrested on April 25, 2012. He quickly pled guilty to Kathy's murder and was sentenced to life in prison. But in a strange twist of fate, he would only serve 2 years behind bars before dying of cancer in 2014. This case is a masterclass in how assumptions can blind an investigation. The police spent years looking at the boyfriend, the lover, and the addict, while the true killer was hiding in plain sight, masquerading as a helpful friend. It leaves us with a chilling final thought to walk away with today. How well do we truly know the people who offer to keep us safe? Subscribe to Hidden Reality for more incredible true stories and hidden realities from around the world.